This is the YouTube video, South Carolina and Ron Paul. This video covers breaking news for the South Carolina and Super Tuesday primaries. Please go for background info to my other videos at youtube.com/Jim Condit Jr. Mark Adams, who earned his law degree and his Master of Business Administration at the University of Florida, and who has been involved in several successful lawsuits involving candidate and voters' rights, has discovered a bombshell that could begin to rout the hide-the-ballots computer election systems and begin the actual restoration of honest, in-the-open counting of ballots across the USA. Today is Thursday, January 17, 2008, and the South Carolina primary for 2008 is on this Saturday, January 19, 2008. Incredibly, the entire state of South Carolina is using the paperless iVotronic touchscreen voting systems, the worst possible kind of system. That means there is not only no paper trail, but no paper at all. What is about to happen in the South Carolina presidential primary underscores why we at WatchTheVote2008.com tried so hard to watch the vote count in Iowa and New Hampshire on January 3rd and January 8th, 2008. In Iowa and New Hampshire, there was something to watch because all the ballots in the Iowa caucus were counted in the open, and some of the ballots in New Hampshire were counted in the open. As we have been warning for the last 6 months, now that we're past Iowa and New Hampshire, there is nothing to watch. All the ballots are hidden from the people via, quote, hide the ballots, hide the evidence, unquote, computer systems. These systems are unconstitutional, as we shall show, and I would say criminal as well. So Mark Adams of Florida, having been asked for help by a South Carolina voter, called South Carolina State Election Commission and talked to Chris Whitmire, the public information officer. The entire article by Mark Adams, entitled South Carolina Elections Are Unconstitutional, can be found at Op-Ed News, and we'll put that up at the end of this short video. The entire article by Mark Adams is worth reading, including the very informative links at the end of the article. Mark pointed out the egregious known problems with the iVotronic touchscreen system. Whitmire mindlessly repeated what all these craven election officials say when so confronted. He said the election officials have confidence in the computer systems. During several minutes when Whitmire left the phone, Mr. Adams discovered a bombshell in the South Carolina State Constitution. In Article 2, Section 1, the South Carolina Constitution states, "The ballot shall not be counted in secret." When Mr. Whitmire, the voice of South Carolina election officials, came back on the line, Mr. Adams asked if he could tape record the next part of the conversation. Mr. Whitmire, so typical of so-called public servants these days, said no, he could not tape record. Mark Adams then asked election information officer Whitmire two brilliant questions. Quote, Chris, how do the touchscreen computers count the votes which are cast on them? Whitmire, well, they add them up as they are cast. Mark Adams, can anyone see the votes being counted? Whitmire, well, no. To summarize the rest of the conversation, Adams said, well, since Article 2, Section 1 of the South Carolina State Constitution states that the ballot shall not be counted in secret, why are you about to hold an election which violates your own state constitution? Whitmire's answers were pathetic and ridiculous, and he seems to have realized how weak they were by the puny fight that he put up. The correct answer is that the processing of the votes in secret by the state of South Carolina on the ES&S provided iVotronic computer system is blatantly unconstitutional, not only against the South Carolina Constitution, but against the U.S. Constitution as defined twice by the U.S. Supreme Court. Two U.S. Supreme Court decisions, both still standing, have defined what our constitutional right to vote means. U.S. versus Mosley, 1915, and Reynolds versus Sims, 1964. In these two decisions, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that our right to vote consists of two parts, A, the right to cast a ballot, and B, the right to know that it was counted accurately. All states hiding the ballot count from the people via computers are violating the second part of our right to vote as defined twice by the U.S. Supreme Court. That is, the right to know that our ballots are being counted accurately. This and much more documentation can be found in the National Clean Elections lawsuit filed by Mr. Robert Schultz of We the People Foundation. Go to the votefraud.org homepage and click on the National Clean Elections lawsuit link. So what is the significance of Mark Adams finding this incredible evidence at this time? It cues up the chance for any or all of the presidential candidates to finally turn the computer vote fraud issue into a raging national issue. While I believe all the presidential campaigns should do it, I want to appeal especially to Ron Paul and the Ron Paul campaign, because he alone has caught fire in this presidential campaign with millions of real, alert Americans behind him, and because he is the recognized leader of the several million alert Americans who already want to win this year, dethrone the warmongering neocons he himself has decried so often, and restore true freedom in the United States of America. Well, I would recommend for Ron Paul and the Ron Paul campaign to have joined in the recount in New Hampshire with a view to establish the procedures leading up to that recount and to spotlight the computer vote fraud issue for the nation. It is also true that the chain of custody of the ballots, especially in the big cities of New Hampshire, is open to questions of tampering and possible ballot replacement. To give credit where credit is due, Ron Paul did say in his letter announcing that he would not join in the New Hampshire recount that his opponents were not beneath using vote fraud against him. But as more than one internet commentator has stated, by not at least supporting the recount efforts of Democratic presidential candidate Dennis Kucinich and Republican presidential candidate Albert Howard, the impression is given that the Ron Paul campaign is willing to let the known discrepancies in New Hampshire go unscrutinized, and therefore will be willing to put up with vote fraud everywhere else as well. It was a very demoralizing letter for many of Dr. Paul's supporters. However, in South Carolina, there is no such possible clouding of the issue. All the ballots are being hidden from the people. In fact, there are no ballots. Not only is this an unconstitutional system by the U.S. Constitution and the South Carolina Constitution, it is the greatest possible insult to the intelligence of the candidates and the intelligence of the voters. This lawsuit should be filed in advance of the South Carolina primary, or at least in advance of the Super Tuesday primaries, on constitutional principle, regardless of any particular election. If we let those running the country count the votes in secret and then announce the results to us like we are slaves, then we are not sure of the election results. In which case, all the shouting, all the sign waving, all the door-to-door canvassing, all the radio and TV ads are so much sound and fury. The RNC, that is the Republican National Committee, the Democratic National Committee, their 50 secretaries of state, and the 4 mega computer companies to which they have delegated the vote processing to are just making fools of all of us. As outlined above, Congressman Paul can speak out on the voting issue on purely constitutional grounds in harmony with his entire career. As a side bonus, but not the main point, this is a winning issue for the presidential race of 2008. Millions of alert Americans will rally to the cause if Congressman Paul raises the flag on this issue. People are aching for a visible leader to turn the issue of an honest and open vote count into a raging national issue. This is a black and white issue, and by that I mean this is good versus evil. It is a constitutional versus unconstitutional issue. The failure to contest such blatant disregard of the law by election officials in South Carolina and the Super Tuesday states will signal to the Americans and all supporters that the Ron Paul campaign is willing to put up with a system which can be easily rigged and in which Americans have no clue if the ballots are counted honestly or dishonestly, because the evidence, that is the ballots, are being hidden from the people. I ask the millions of alert Americans to pray for Dr. Ron Paul as he now faces yet another heavy burden in his career. This is an issue that has been forced upon him, and an issue on which he may have to overrule his entire top-paid staff based on the last 4 months of their abysmal, deceptive actions behind the scenes, opposing those of us who have been trying to ensure a fair vote count for Ron Paul and for all other candidates and for all Americans. Thank you for your attention. Let's work as hard as we can, pray as hard as we can, and God will do the rest. It's 1776 all over again, but this time you are there. Everyone into the battle.